All right. What I want to start off with today, I know there'll be some people that'll probably join as we go. So what I want to start off with today is go over, what I start to see through big money, and then we're going to go through our charts today to add on to what we see for our week's end. All right. So let's see what we can see through here. I know I put into our chat as well a couple of ideas of what either is charted or what I've actually already had as a on my watch list. Okay, so for example, there's a couple of emojis we'll be starting to use in here. If we see 100 points for the score above, we'll be using 100. Okay. If we see big money in terms of relative to what we're looking at, if it's actually quite a bit, we'll be using the big money icon as well, just to kind of bring additional, big money in big money. Just think of it that way, right? Then we have extra time. So if we do see that we've got at least 2 months time, that's generally going to be, they're looking to be probably a little bit safer with it. These situations may consider that, we might have a swing in the other direction, but they are trying to get in a good position in here, probably before volatility starts to spike in these situations. Okay. What else? If I do use the basketball, that's just going to be signify that I have that actually posted in my charts in EOW trades, so you guys can take a look at the charts as well. What else? Oh, if it's this, screaming down or going up, that's just saying that it's going heavily in that direction, maybe, so out of the money in a sense. Let's use that to consider out of the money downward and out of the money upward, just to show that they're far and out of the money puts, right? So these ones strike 60, 60, you see how those are right at it. So we're not going to use that there. CGC, this is right at the money. But in terms of this one, CGC, this is actually quite a large sum, 1.1 mil for such a small amount. If these are really cheap, but 20,000 contracts to put a mil on that, the fluctuations are extremely large on that. Okay. So number one, they've expected a fair amount of time for that. Number two, put that on there. Number two, what else? It was a large amount of money for CGC, right? And they're expecting it to go down, but I mean, we'll see how this goes. Okay, so add on that guy, money back. Okay. What is up? Good to have you. I know people are going to trickle in little by little. I'm just starting off by slowly going through big money here. How you doing? Can't hear you, by the way, but let's see.
Yo, what's up, Eric?
How's everything going for you?
It's going well, man. I started trading again. So, and I was actually posting some of the profits on the club profits page. So I think, dude, like this month I'm up like 5K. So
that's good to hear. Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, let's add into that knowledge and let's, review some things. The week's over. I'm just going to take a little bit of time. We can still go out later tonight. But let's take a look. And what I kind of wanted to do was really, as I'm going through big money, I'm just going to kind of go through this last week and start speaking out loud so you can kind of judge and see if you can start to hear what I see or what's read in between the lines when we see these things, right? Does that make sense? So, last week, this is the end of last week, 7/8. I'm just looking at what was near closing, because these were all at about like right after closing, right? 105, near the end. You see these big money, RKK, score of 63. That's not, so what I'm doing is if it's 100, it's because the score is showing 100. Okay. We want to make sure, my original thesis that I started with in just the option scanner before we had big money was based upon the fact that with these 100s, when they show up, right, there's something we really got to look at. Now, what is it about the 100? Okay, number one, they spent a lot of money in a big money. So big money is just a mil and over, but here they've spent 9.5 mil. So that's a lot. Okay. Number two, there's this time the hourglass, which shows that they bought, in my case, what I like to think of is at least 2 months time. That's usually, if they expect to move extremely quickly or they're willing to take on more risk, they're going to take month, week, or 0 days to expiration if they know when things are supposed to be happening, right? When you think about that. So these 2 months out, they're buying a lot of time. A lot of what's in here, right, is a part of that. So it's a little bit safer in terms of a out the money type of put, right? And that's also what this is. The angry red here shows that we have a out the money situation that's expecting a lot of hurt, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
What else as well? If this just shows that this is interesting to look at. I want you guys to really think about and consider it. Obviously with SPY, what I'm also doing with these, I probably shouldn't have to do this every time with SPY, but if you see the basketball player, that means that it's very likely in my charts in ERU trades that you can go take a look at. Okay.
Nice.
Let's add on into that. I did say on the other side, if it's out the money on the call side, we'll use Pepe with the up long. Okay. And this was our out the money downward. Okay. What else was I thinking about here too? This one is in case if it's an inverse ETF, but I haven't seen too many of those.
What did you mean by inverse ETF?
Let me show you that actually. So an inverse ETF, let's go find the one that I found it on today. I think it was in unusual options. So inverse means when something goes up, this goes down, just like the dollar index we were saying, just like with our bonds and the treasury yields of sorts, where depending on interest rates, it's an inverse relationship. When things go up, the market goes down, right? Now, there's ways in ETFs and these other these ETFs have ways where they can play with the numbers in a sense, and they can short for you and benefit from that. Okay. And instead, what it will track is if a ETF goes up, right? So let me find this one here. Okay, here's one of them, UVXY. So the U, it's usually there's a U or there's an S in there, is what I've noticed. Sometimes an X. Okay, so it's like S, U VXY. So this is tracking the VXY as the VIX. Okay. However, the U means ultra short, which means that for every, let's do it this way, every 1% that the VIX moves up, this one is going to go down 3%. So therefore, what you're thinking here, though, because it's a short bet, right? So some people can purchase into this and say, I'm going to buy, at the $12 to protect my portfolio in a sense, right? I'm going to put X amount of dollars into it to hedge my portfolio. And so if the VIX in this situation, or SPY or whatever, goes down 1%, this guy is going to go up 3% because this is a ultra short. And then usually in the name of it, you'll see the number. It's usually a 3Xer. So which means that for every inverse move, you have that opposite 3%, 3X reaction. Okay.
So it would go the same way then, where like, let's say like it pumps, then this UVXY would like go down 3 times.
Yeah. So it's the opposite. So if it's to say this is what the bears, right? This is what the bears would buy, right? In order to profit.
Gotcha.
Right? Because with this is the bears wanting this to go up now, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
And so this is saying, oh, bears, right? So the UVXY ultra short, right? So this is like layers of thinking you got to think here. Okay. Let's go through this thought process right now, because this is a little more complex. We start off with the opposite of the VIX, right? So usually if the VIX goes up, then SPY goes down. Usually when the VIX goes down, SPY can go up, right? Okay. However, we're betting on the inverse of the VIX. That makes sense. We want the, all right.
Yeah.
And then we want that to go up. So it's layers of thinking here, right?
Nice.
You see
Got
that?
it.
It's extra to think about. Okay. And that can get very confusing for most. All right. Let's continue. And so,
Nice.
let's do that real quick for everybody in here under unusual options.
What charts have you been looking at?
I'm going to go over those in a little bit. I'm going to add on to them too, as well as we continue with what we see in big money. So we're going to, what we see in here, let's call a couple of these out as well, and we'll throw them into the list. But I have a couple that I've got prepared for us. We'll go into that in the next like 5 to 10 minutes, because we can go through this. I just want to go through this week. What did this week tell us in terms of big money, right? Okay, so let's come all the way down. Okay, so that means we got to go back up. So let me scoot back up, because we got to go back to the Monday. Let's start there. So 14th, we still got a couple days to go. They're nicely sectioned off though. Come on, scroll.
They've just been trading like SPY and Tesla lately.
Tesla goes wacko sometimes. Like
Yeah.
the company doesn't make sense. Like I don't know if you took a moment to read what I had posted in our I think I did it in graduates. I'm not sure if I did it in my own trades. I've been trying to keep things that have specific language that I've trained you guys to understand in ICA graduates, and then give kind of the overall idea of it in ERU trades, because I know a lot of people don't necessarily understand the way that I speak, and I don't want them to mistake my lingo in a manner, if that makes sense, right? So, but you guys have heard me speak in this way for a very long time now, so adding onto it. So let's see. As I'm going through big money, let me scroll and I'm going to talk. What am I looking for? I'm looking for things in terms of unusualness in a longer term situation. Yes, there's going to be some of these that are going to be very short term. Okay, so 7-11. So this is the first one that came at the beginning of the week. This is a extremely long term contract, if you see that, right? That's not expiring until next year, mid next year. This strike is actually far down out of the money because they've spent that much time, right? So very far out of the money, actually. This is a 63-point drop from that. Oh, what's that? Okay. And I mean, $1 million for this, the price, a lot of this is paying for time. Think about it that way, right? So, in terms of unusualness, it's just the fact that AVGO doesn't show up too much in our charts and in our tickers and our scanners. So we'll take a look at that. But this is a very long-term bet. So nothing in terms of soon, movements that may come soon. Apple, they expect to go down by October, right? They bought some time. The strike is about $10 out the money, but not exactly expecting Apple to burn, I would say, right? This one was interesting. Twitter expecting that it's going to go down. They've got some time, but 22.6 mil for this amount. It's right at the money too. Okay, so that's in terms of like safety. That's a pretty decent bet, right? That's a pretty decent position to take. SPX. I want to keep in mind SPX, it's a $4,000 ticker. So a lot of the pricing is, like remember when Amazon was at $3,000, it was trading at very high values. It's hard to trade those because they're so expensive, the premiums. You can't get too many of those contracts. So at the end of the day, this isn't even that much money for something like SPX. And then the time frame is, by about the 7/25 is actually right when the Fed is supposed to speak next, right? The next Fed meeting. So they expect it to go up till then, but I doubt that they would, just let the time decay all the way through it. This could have been gone already. They could have been done with this by the end of this week already. Remember, this was Monday. LAZR, that's actually quite a bit of money, right? 1.6, 0.33. So $33 per contract. That's really cheap. Okay. And they want it for next week. They ended up buying, from this date about 2 weeks of sorts. So they let it go through the week. Well, we can take a peek as to what LAZR. Let me add that on here. LAZR. What they did in terms of, they go down below 5.5. No, that was Monday. Okay. Millions of dollars for puts for after the Fed meeting. Okay, I can see why they took that 1.7 mil, but we see a lot of these SPY, IWM, and look at the time frame in which there's being taken out. Is this taken out later in the day? Yep, it's taken out at the end of that day, at the end of Monday. Okay, so quickly, let me just swap over so we can take a peek at that too. How did it perform after that? Right, oh, let's go in here. IWM. I'll come back to SPY after. They took it out on Monday. A bunch of these puts, those puts end up paying out after taking it out on Monday? Let's take a peek as to what price did. Right, those Monday at the end of the day. Oh, I did copy this over. What happened? We're on the daily, so each one of the markings that I have as we zoom in will give us an idea of actually what the week did. So it'll adjust in a second. July, and then we say July 11th was Monday. So end of day Monday, what was the price? Right here, okay. End of day Monday, did we go lower from there? Yes, we did. We actually went down toward 167. And so they end up being in the money. What was it say? It was 164. They didn't quite hit them in the money, but they definitely did make some, you know, make a decent profit off that when you think about it. If they got in here and then it went down there in just that many days, I'm sure they made a profit off of that. Okay, that's good to know. So, you know, that kind of gives you, you know, what I'm trying to help you guys understand is, you know, what do I consider a higher probability? Okay, one of the higher probabilities, or one of the things that I would say adds to probability, would definitely be when large money, you know, purchases come in right after close. Okay, what they've pretty much done is they've said, today's candle did this, now I want to do this. Does that make sense? They waited for the candle close to make their decision, and they've got 15 minutes to make that decision. And a lot of times with that situation, what they are planning is for a swing trade, or potentially, you know, the upcoming week, for example. So when we look at Friday ones, what are they preparing to expect for the upcoming weeks? Because the weekly candle is extremely important to understand as well, right? So let's go through the rest pretty quickly in terms of what we see. Expecting energy to go up. I'll go back through these after and add in more emojis, because I just really wanted to solidify that that type of structure today. So that's why I posted that. Meta, expecting it to go down. Tesla. So overall, like, if you keep in mind, over the week, we did get, so, you know, we closed lower overall in the week. We did have a very interesting looking candle though, because we rejected a lot of the lower bounds, but it doesn't mean we're actually out of the woods just yet. Okay, so like, look, 109, right? Very short expiration. This is already done with. Did the Qs go up by the end of the week, right? This was on Monday. Did we end up closing up higher? I don't think the Qs did. We'll take a look at that in a moment. JPM, that was very likely their earnings type of play. Apple, Wells Fargo, there's more earnings and stuff as well. Okay, end of that day, we have these large, you know, big money puts again for expected further downside. That adds more pressure down, right? Okay, what else? Tesla, SPY, even more big money coming in. Okay, ooh, all right, and that's got some time to it too. Okay, those keep coming in, right? That's why I put the guy with the monocle to show you guys, hey, take a look at that. Tesla, Etsy, okay, another big premium of Etsy going down by the end of this week. What else? SPX, that's small in terms of SPX. Multiple hits on it though. Tesla, Apple, right? We saw a fair rally. Okay, NVIDIA down by 24. That's a interesting one, right? They didn't afford too much, but they're expecting a lot of pain for NVIDIA over time, over the next 2 years. That's an very, very interesting one to think about. Comcast up over next year and a half, or actually next year, right? Apple up. Okay, so I do have a couple of charts prepped, so let's go into that in just a moment. IWM, so there's, again, at the end, what I noticed, at the end of the day, there's a lot of these puts being taken out, okay? We have a lot of these downward pressure, you might imagine. On the other hand, throughout the day, we've got a lot more of these short-term contracts, either expiring at the end of the week, they already expired, for example, or aiming for by next Monday type of situation, that really don't show that there's people betting long-term for upward movement, okay? Yeah, you had all these, there was a couple of days where Apple got a lot of interest. It's what we noticed is we had a very fair bounce off the bottom, okay? Let's go ahead. Yeah, today, at the end of the day, we got these, this 9 mil expectation downward. So we're going to keep that in mind as we switch over. Jump into my charts. Okay. So IWM, let's go back into what I have ready for us in SPY. Okay. So what ended up happening with SPY? Let's start off here with our weekly, because I think it's important for us to, number one, take what the weekly, especially with what the strat and what we understand about, price action, okay? What does, are there any interesting looking results from these candles that we can tell, what is it in terms of, candle patterns? And then also we'll use a strat in just a moment too. Now, what did happen? So strat wise, you got to take a look here. We do have a 2-1-2 bearish reversal. What does that mean? Let's draw that guy out. What you have is you had a 2 candle breaking upward, but an inward 1, right? And then suddenly we have a 2 breaking downward. Now in this situation, we already have broken down below the bottom of this 2. So now we're targeting this guy and then potentially the body of this one, and then down here as well. Those are the 3 next targets that you could take. And keep in mind, we're still up here though. So in terms of the strat, they would even say, don't take the entry until it breaks this previous week's, this week's low. All right, keep that in mind. We're waiting for it to break here, not here. We're waiting for it to break here because and also if we can with force, right, with magnitude, with an oomph downward. And if that happens, then we target here and potentially here as well. And if that does continue, there is possibility for continuation afterwards. But we were also mentioning and saying that as well, a couple of these are showing that type of action for the weekly, and very likely for the monthly as well, if it does break a previous candle. So keep that in mind. We almost did that this week. And if it does, then it opens up the price action for this down here. It's for us to potentially target those lower bounds, okay? Now, real quick, I wanted to show how as well, because I do have this on the weekly. As well, let's go through and show you. So this weekly candle does that. Let's go through as the other charts that I had on this side. I have to pull it up in the monthly. Okay. So depending on the class that you took with me, there's some of them that were able to get through to, the redistribution or reaccumulation graphs as well. And depending on the level that you're at, it may or may not have been, fully gone over. But pretty much what we have is that D phase of that downfall, that, the cycle winter, okay? And the cycle winter has these formats that are essentially just the opposites of the upward versions, right? We have the upward version as well. Did I put it in here? I thought I did. There we go. The upward version that I did show you guys, right? These are just flipped over. Now, with that being said, let's go a little closer into our charts, and I'm going to bring this guy, right? Actually, let's really fast in all of these show that they're really just bear flags, okay? What is a bear flag? You guys have seen it before. All you have is you do have this rising channel in which we end up breaking down below. And depending on the action of it, some of them, this may have a triangular shape, but they all start breaking down below because they end up losing, there's not enough buyers up above, okay? It can't break up above it, and so therefore it relaxes back down through the channel. How it acts in there, we'll use these as visuals as to what potentially could be happening for a lot of our different charts, because there's actually a lot of this happening. I'm gonna let's go into the 1 hour chart. Oh, the green heat map is just to show that today, specifically Friday, we did have a green day, but the week itself ended up with that really ugly, almost, kind of a doji type of candle. What the weekly showed, you can imagine, here's where our week started. So our candle starts up here. We end up closing. So we ended up with this type of a candle with a wick. Let me double check that. Yeah, for the week. Right, we closed last week up here, okay? We opened, closed, and we closed right very, very close to it. So, at the end of the week, did we make much progress anywhere? Not really, okay? However, let's be clear about what's going on with this movement. We still haven't made higher lows, if anything, right? Or higher highs in the situation, because if we break up above, then we can start to head back toward the gap above as well. But until that happens, we're actually still showing that we're just in this little bearish channel, okay? Now, another thing I do want to do, remember, we're going to pull this a little bit further out. Let's go into the 4 hour chart. I might use a 2 but we got to pull that chart closer. Okay. This guy. We already do have a bit of that action happening when you think about it. You can consider this to be a part of it here, where you have down, right? Down, reaction, a little bit of a reaction, a little bit of a relief, but don't really make any higher. Exactly, right? No higher. And then a breakdown. From that breakdown, you have this little flag, or zigzags as well, and then another breakdown out of that channel, okay? And from that, you continue to have indecision, but very likely break further down. So that's one possibility. With you already have distribution up here, right? Do you see that? Another possibility is if you think that, right, and that would be to say that this was your first Wyckoff, and then you have your second part of Wyckoff, so C and then D, right? And we're still going down. Another possibility is that this could be happening here again, or even down here. So, you could go and compare those on your own, but those are just potentials that we could see from the movement of what's going on. All right. What else? Let's add on our, what's our resistance right now? Right now, we still haven't broken up above either of these two previous peaks. So remind yourself that, until we break above that, we're not out of the woods. We still haven't broken the overall downtrend at all. Okay. In terms of that, we're still headed down. Now, yeah, I have a really good one here. Let's add into, you guys remember the Fib channels that I've drawn, but let's, and this was from Wednesday's class. But let me clean up just a little bit of it for you. And what here I want to show you. What I want to focus on are our Fib channels. Remember when Kimo and I both were saying, hey, everybody's so fearful, we very likely are going to rally. Now look how perfect this rally is, guys. So we go up, we have a bull flag, and we head further up. Now this bull flag did not end up playing out. We had a little peak up, so very likely that wave 5 took a little peak up. But look at this. Remember when I said when we come down toward this very bottom, we tend to rally where? We tend to rally a length of 1, from 0 to 1 on my Fibonacci movement. Wasn't that just perfect right here? 0 to 1. That's beautiful in terms of math, right? Let me show you back here, okay? Anytime we come back down to this bottom of this whitish part of the channel, the opaque part of it, notice the rally that we have and the magnitude of that rally. I have these color coded, goes back toward that grayish line. That's the full Fibonacci measurement. And notice how often that's happened. So if we come back toward this bottom of this channel, let's prep for that again, right? Very bottom, rallies right to this level. Very bottom, rallies right to that level each time, okay? Now these two didn't quite make it, but this is a 0.236. The second time it came down, it came to the top of this first, right? It bounced off this, notice that. Bounced off that, and then came back and re-rallied back up another length of 1. That's really interesting. So, large movements have these reliefs, and there's kind of a measurement to that when you think about it, right? There's a distance that we can expect over time. And one of the things is, if you're really planning for these things, understanding that we sometimes need to set that plan out at the beginning of the week and do our best to hold it through, right? I'll admit as well, there's a lot of these where emotions start to take over through the day, whether, sometimes it's also when, you wake up tired and aren't really in the right mindset to trade either. And that creates a situation where you might get out because you get faked out or because you have a sudden fear that it's going to go in the other direction. So having your trades planned out for these, next time we do have, let's see here, next time we do have this come back down toward this level, okay, that's what I have graphed out here. I mean, this is a copy of something from before. So obviously you're going to have that same bounce off of the bottom because I've layered a similar type of movement. That right now we have all this resistance right here. Okay, here's the upper side of it. But right now that 390, we've failed to, and especially this week too, if we really were able to go back and recapture it, I would even say like this week very likely should have been a situation if we really believe inflation's, dying down, but CPI and PPI numbers both came up high. This shows that there's a possibility that the bears are, or the bulls are starting to get a little bit scared. They're not exactly confident that it's actually headed up, right? So remember I told you down here that we're going to very likely see a bounce. You remember that arrow that I drew? So we'll add on in here what we expect soon. Let's do that here. What do we expect with the upcoming week, right? Especially because really quick too. Let's jump back into this guy. What was the weekly again? Weekly, remember, strat-wise, we expect a bearishness, right? Strat-wise, we expect downward movement. But the candle, I want to remember and point out that this candle itself has a very, it's price dropped quite heavily and went down and tested the bottom, but we still closed pretty high and made kind of an, you know, a push upward almost. You know, it closed very closely, but at the end of the day, it's at the very top end of that price action. It's showing that, you know what, for right now, we are up here, right? Or at least here. So we're above this previous resistance as well. Okay. That's something to keep in mind. So there is a little bit of a bullish behavior, but overall, we're still headed and feeling bearishness in terms of that type of channel, right? We do have this kind of a bear flag you might consider too. Okay, so down and then this flag. So keep in mind, we're still inside of it. So let's add in what I predict right now for SPY next week. I still feel we're headed further down. There's, you know, what reasons are there right now? The only thing that's been doing well, and I know Kimo also mentioned, we're headed back into earnings seasons again. We got to talk a little bit about that too. Earnings, as you know, a result, at least with what we've seen in this past week, are starting to become quite alarming. And I'll share some other resources that I'm hearing that from too. What we have here, right? We said we have a flag. You could consider, right? Earlier, we did have this where it was a bit of a triangular formation. We expanded the channel, okay? Expanded that channel. And now we're simply still retesting. So we still haven't really broken out of anything yet. Still inside this little, and let's see, let's add on this week's prediction. Let's move this guy. I still think we're headed down, and this time we may break down below because we've come back up here, 1, 2, and you can consider this testing that 1, right? It tests this part and respects it to an extent, my Fib channel. So keep that in mind. If we've respected that and we're done testing and we've now, remember, we have areas of supply. So, you know, you've got this supply that's now tested and depleted, tested. Is it depleted? We'll have to see. We could still come back up. And now we have here, it was recent, you know, it was support. Now notice it's now resistance. It's resistance. Even, you know, it came back up, pulled from this though. And so it's very likely this is all gone. This is all gone, right? These people that wanted to buy and sell, you know, are they willing to pay 390 to 400 right now for SPY? Or I'm not quite sure about that, you know. Something has to change and show with our economy that we're really showing strength and that we're in the clear and of a sort that we can actually rebalance out this issue with our inflation. I don't think that's happened yet. On the other hand, you have this that's being tested, right? That's the peak of it. That's kind of where we're at right now. So next week, you know, what can I could see us coming up to here, maybe testing up a little bit of that. Hey, good to have you join us. Been talking to myself for a little bit, but it's fine. Everybody's gonna take a look at this later because I know it's Friday and not everybody's willing to take Friday afternoon off like this. So how you doing?
Good, how about you? Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome here. Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to start adding some more, you know, some more eyes on the things. Let me just go over this again here real quick. What I was showing was just the fact that, remember when Kimo and I were saying we're too overextended, we're too fearful and of sorts, and I was showing we're at the bottom of our channel. And whenever we hit the bottom of our channel, the Fibonacci movement that we like to see and generally see is about a measurement of 1. So like with the first big movement that we've been able to measure my Fib channels off of, that tends to happen when we hit the bottom of it. And so as a result, what we have to look at now is that if we really are respecting this line here, right? Notice here, here, even here, we gapped here, here. Okay, this up here as well, you got to imagine it's not the perfect, right? We do have certain areas where maybe it tested, but it still kind of did respect parts of my channel to an extent. Okay, so what I like to think here is that now that we've tested here, here, and we're pretty much testing it here with today's close, right? We came back up right? 0.618 rallied up here. You could argue that we have a leg one, so wave one, and then we have an ABC correction, and we could be doing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a possibility. But I wanted, I was just saying as well that, do you really think people are willing to pay $400 for SPY right now? Like, I find that tough to believe with the way that things are going with our CPI and our PPI numbers that just came out. This I feel feels very trappy to me in a sense. We're still in a downtrend either way, right? We're still headed down. We haven't broken any of these major uptrends. And with this one right here, we're still down below this one part of the channel that I've shown you. Now, in terms of supply and demand, let's talk about that. So here we exhausted this supply of people willing to buy and sell, and we haven't been back up here since. We rejected and came all the way down here. Okay, that was a really large move. Then we've sapped out this supply, tested this supply, right? Supply and demand, right? And so think of it here. You retested these people already, okay? If it came back here, there's a lot of people that are going to probably look to get themselves out because they're looking at how inflation's gone wacko, okay? So if it came back up here, you have a lot of people ready to sell, okay? That's why this is struggling right here too. And then as a result, what else? This is just retesting the supply of people from the most recent here too, right? If you notice, the way that our channel really starts to look is up, let me use a different color. Up high, down low, a little bit lower. Okay, this is kind of getting smaller, but what I'm expecting is that we're gonna come back and retest this first. We're probably gonna find exhaustion of there, retest this supply, and then head further down is my expectation right now. Especially also because big money did also take some puts down, right? When you think about it. The last print we had, let me just look at it real quick. SPY 9/16, 366, 9.5 million, 110 score, 11,000 contracts at $8.27. Right now it's at 385, so down to 366. So they're targeting here and below, okay? My 0.5, if anything, okay? So that's big money is saying, let me draw my cross line. August, they're saying September, right? September, what exactly was it? $66. What was the date in September? 16th. So they've got themselves some time for this. Right, 66, all just up and down. So, I mean, shoot, even if I were just to extend this all the way down. I'll do that without fucking things up. Let's see. Oh, he's locked, that's why. What does that look like for them? Yeah, even if we rally back to the 1, by the time we get back there, right, that's still below their target. So we're in this channel headed down. So that's what I see with that. All right, let's add on into additional tickers I want to talk about and that I want you guys to be aware of what's happened throughout this week. First off, let's use our VIX to get an idea of what the fear really looks like in our entire market. Now, I want to point out this chart that I'm pulling up right now is completely blank. So that way I can talk to you guys in terms of what I'm thinking. Oh, I thought it was completely blank. Hold on. Why is this one not? Oh, that's why. Let's go into this guy. This one should be completely blank because I wanted to, kind of in a sense, review the thought process as we go here too. Let's go into the VIX and take a peek as to what the VIX is telling us of what's about to happen. Are people still fearful, or are we actually starting to get greedy? No. What's happening with the VIX? Okay. So weekly, right? We're on the weekly first. Weekly, we're still showing that we're headed down, right? We're being bearish. There's continuation to the downside on the weekly side of things. All right. Now, let's really quick, because weekly is extremely important. Let's take a look and to see what the trend looks like. We have this kind of a cupping action, if you might imagine, but we do have ourselves in a bit of an uptrend. Okay, at least the bottom side of it that supports it. We still have room to fall back down though, keep that in mind. But we do right now have a little bit of decent support, if you might imagine, that's actually keeping things above here, if anything, because this 23 area, you can imagine, has quite a bit of, even back here, you might imagine, a fair respect in this terms of this little area of 24 to 25 range. Now, top wise, we do have, right, it's coming down, but we got to keep in mind too, because this is near the bottom of this could be a very, a drop of sorts. But what could spook the markets, I keep saying, is the main thing right now potentially would just be Fed talking about raising interest rates to 1. But I don't see that necessarily happening because they have so many political reasons not to try to support and pump it. So, and it's possible that there is, with the CPI readings, we might have kind of gotten a fake out this week, and we could see a little bit bigger of a pricing in before these things actually happen with the market. So keep that in mind. Are they, it's always hard to tell, have they prepared for this and it's already been done, or are they still, waiting for certain things to be confirmed? A lot of institutions and a lot of banks, etc., are expecting that we should be considering a 1.0, interest rate raise. But if, whether that happens, we'll have to see if the Fed, really decides to do so. That's the big question. Okay, so VIX is showing bearishness, but at a bit of support. So that's really tough to say. We do have room to fall in terms of the VIX, so we still have a little bit of room to rally, you could imagine. But that uptrend, I don't necessarily, until we break that uptrend, if we really want to see the markets rally, it'd have to do this, if you imagine. It'd have to come back to these. And that type of certainty, I don't see our markets having this type of certainty anytime soon, right? Because the standard deviation, narrowing means that there's people less fearful about price. If we continue to drop, then fear and additional concerns about the economy will actually cause the VIX to go upward. We got to keep that in mind. Okay. What else? Dollar keeps going up on the weekly. Keep that in mind. Okay, but I do want to point out, let's pull up MACD. And what I want to point out here is that MACD shows a little bit of divergence. If you imagine, we're up pretty high here, but the issue is the fact that this volume is starting to exhaust itself. So we very likely could start to see a peak here, and at least profit taking and some relief back down toward this 105 range to test. So remember, this is on a weekly situation. We shot up very quickly. Again, keep in mind, this has a lot to do with other economies and other currencies really struggling, namely things like the euro are struggling because they're having trouble with sourcing energy and and supporting their own economy and outputting things in their economy, because things are starting to get so expensive. Inflation's hitting everybody, you've got to imagine. I was mentioning on Wednesday with the previous review was the fact that it's interesting how we're expecting the dollar to lose value, but because it's pegged against so many other things and other things are actually failing faster, the dollar has actually been shooting up. All right. But just be wary, the dollar very likely could start to show a little bit of topping because again, the volume isn't going to continue to support this going up without some form of relief. What does that mean? This going down means the markets do now have a better pressure. It could mean that people are putting money back into things and could be looking for that risk on with the markets possibility. So there is a possible bullish side of things if the dollar does start to relax itself. Real quick too, let's pull up on the daily for it too. Right, we're showing a rounding motion up here a little bit. It's not exactly the biggest divergence just yet. So there still could be a little move up, but it's starting to lose steam. So keep that in mind. Same with oil. This is actually, oil's back down below 100. And on the daily, you can see we've had a bit of an ABC corrective pattern from the top, right? We've struggled up here, but this is kind of textbook in terms of ABC correction. Got this big giant peak of it, right? You blow off top, and then you have an A, B, C, right? That's pretty standard that we've seen in an Elliott wave. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's more movement upwards after all this profit's been taken, and people now will, expect upward movement. Oh, actually, hold on real quick. Let me take a look. There are some forces that, remember, my theory though is that we can go overseas and ask people to output more, but businesses themselves, if we're looking at getting rid of so much of oil and supporting things with, solar and these other things, well, at the end of the day, the producers are going to milk it for all it's worth. And so they don't necessarily have incentive to output more, and increasing the price of oil will benefit them. So again, the motivations behind the situation are very conflicting, and I don't necessarily see this relieving itself like crazy just yet. We still could potentially see some hurt for the markets with continued inflation and a limited supply of certain things. Okay, so gas pump wise, we're still seeing some fair inflation that's hurting the consumer at the end of the day. And this part down here as well, I want to point out, we are starting to curl a little bit. We are starting to show less, right, selling. So, just be careful right there, because we're back and we already retested this lower end. We are in a lower downward channel. So just imagine we could still come back here and retest. How that plays out should be how we react though. Okay. All right. Now let's go into what everybody's here for. Ooh, I just noticed this too. Yeah, Bitcoin's back over 20, right? That's nice to see. But I did just post a few of these into ICA graduates, but let me pull this out real quick. There's a couple of redistribution graphs. So this is essentially the winter of any sort of graph you might imagine. Come on, why is it not pulling up? Okay, there we go. Redistribution is essentially that D phase of any sort of chart or any sort of Wyckoff distribution, if you might imagine. So the redistribution chart, I just want to copy this guy over. And let's pull him into the weekly. So what you have is essentially your bear flags, right? There's technically two of them in this one, where you have this flag and then the retest out and a drop after. And if you take a look at this here, let's even pull it up into We already have that shape here, you might imagine, right? And then we have another one kind of forming a smaller version of it down here. And we still don't have enough buying to support that we're headed back up for Bitcoin. We have a lot of selling down here, but we don't have the volume to necessarily say Bitcoin's headed back up. Now on the daily, let's go. Let me expand this so you can see some more. Strat on this, right? We're just flagging still. We're at a little bit of equilibrium, but as soon as the Fed does speak or like, you know, spook anything else, it's expected that this is very likely downward channel. There's a first one in here with a smaller, right? So this actually already happened in here. So you have the channel and then the bottom test. Okay, then you have another channel here. This one didn't even need to retest. It's another one of these graphs that stays in here and then just shoots out. Okay, so right now we're doing something else similar. And look at this. Big sell off, and then just dying volume. All right. Yes, we got some little hopes of green, but how we react to this top of it, we keep pushing and selling off into the bottom, selling off, and we actually have rising volume selling into the end of it. Okay, that makes sense. Another peek at this too, and I want to point out is where are the holes at? Where are the holes at? Okay, so this showed that we didn't deplete it just yet, but then we had another hole at the top. Do you see that? No buyers here. Push up, because at the bottom there's nobody, and then we have a bunch of nobodies up at the top before we push back down. Okay, so notice when we have low volume, okay, this all shows that there are still buyers ready to push it up, right? There's nobody at the bottom, so it pushes the other direction, but then at the end of the day, we still broke out of that channel. So what I do still think with this is, you know, we could still come to the top of it, but it's still bearish for this. What's up? Good to have you. I know people are just kind of coming in and out, but good to have you. We're just going over little bits of the charts one by one. We're just about to get into some of the good stuff too. I just went over SPY, just took a look over at like VIX and those VIX dollar, etc. But let's get into these. So Meta, you know, NVIDIA, Tesla, all these good ones. Let's go over them now. What do we see now? All right, that's terrible, guys. I'm so sorry. This looks like another one of those. I'm just going to copy that straight over. Okay, well, first off, actually, let's actually add. So we do have in Y trades, WAI, Y trades, he's got some stuff that he's adding for us as well. So I want to take a moment and thank him for helping us out with this here. He said he's going to take a look at the video later. But the strat, I know a lot of you guys are looking at the strat. If I just zoom this out into the weekly, it's going to look like this. Okay, so I'm not going to take the moment and go out, but that's what essentially you have this, you know, downward movement, and then you have this pushback toward the top, but you do have this, you know, kind of an indecision. So this little right here is just what we have here. Okay, so let's compare it real quick here. You have this right here is this. Okay, so what we have is just a flag, you can imagine, but I also wanted to point out and add a little bit of Wyckoff onto this and take a reading into what we see with the volume too, right? We do have earnings upcoming, and here's what I noticed with this, right? We've got this big drop. Got this big drop. Okay, we kind of had this rally back to the top, right? And then another drop. All right, and then we just ended up creating this flag formation, right? This pennant, let's be clear, right? Not just a flag, but a pennant. And then the moment we broke down below that, we're just headed back to retest that bottom lower channel. So until, maybe earnings shows something, but let's talk a little bit about what's happened since their last earnings, right? Yes, their last earnings boosted it back up to the top of the channel, but what ended up happening was it's still lower than before. It's not showing that we're valuing it more because of this last earnings, guys, okay? What's happened since then? We've got possible raised rates. We're showing that our economy is slowing down, and we got to talk a little bit about earnings, especially. And I'll give you guys additional resources to kind of add on to that over the weekend. But what's going on with our supply and demand, and what's going on with the issues is the fact that ultimately the pandemic really played around with how we deal with supply and demand, right? Usually it's, it's nicely even, okay? Let's make them larger. What nicely even, supply and demand, okay? But what ended up happening with our, pandemic, demand slowly shot down. What happened then is they printed a bunch of money, gave everybody stimmies, and so that brought demand back up, actually past what previous supply was, right? And so first, what happened with supply was supply dropped to kind of try to match, because again, like nobody's working, nobody needed to, to produce as much because you're getting some money. And so now the discrepancy between the two was even higher. Then what companies did was they started to try to catch up with the production, but that takes time. As that took time, what you end up happening was the fact that this demand side that we created with all that printing now has created all this extra price inflation. Everybody knows that. Everybody's feeling it. Everybody's paid more for things. They're, getting less for what they're paying for, and everybody's adjusting to that too. Small businesses, big businesses, everybody, okay? But the issue is that this was never sustainable. This was never sustainable, and all of a sudden, they have to, demand starting to decrease. People aren't able to afford as much. And as different layers of our economy, you can think of it as poor, middle class, upper middle class, right? You have these tiers that are kind of, I like to think of like layers of a cake. But as each one starts to feel the effects of it, we start to, think of it. The first big drop was the poor can't afford as much anymore. So demand drops, right? Groceries, etc., whatever, the luxuries and things like that. Then middle class, right? Upper middle class, rich, ultra rich, and it slowly drops the demand all the way down. And now you have all this oversupply, okay? But the issue is the fact that now, due to the prices that people are willing to pay, due to, how did we get to this point to create all this extra supply? Now we got to hire more people. We had to increase people's wages. There was a lot of tech that was jumping ship because people are offering great new deals, great new packages. Hey, come to our side because you know what? We've got all this extra money to spend because there's all this demand coming to us. We need to adjust. But then now what's happening now? You're hearing a lot about layoffs. You're hearing a lot about people having to make those adjustments. And that's what's generally happening with earnings of sorts is now, because this has dropped so drastically, now we have a lot less demand. Why? Because people are paying more at the gas pump. People are paying more for groceries. Necessities are going to outweigh these wants and these extra frivolous things, such as, maybe even like vacations as well and visiting people. That demand's suddenly dropping. So now all this extra supply, all these extra people that we've hired that now are actually not really needed, we're now going to be looking to exhaust, get rid of that supply in a way, and we're going to start to see people being fired. These companies trying to rebalance their balance sheet because they had to make adjustments and they may be over predicted. They overshot it. All right, and prices start to go down. Hopefully, is the goal. But as it stagnates up here, as we have this discrepancy, and still, people are struggling because prices don't fall right away. Right? Demand continues to struggle, and we try to find a new rebalance of supply and demand, which generally will take some time, okay? It doesn't happen right away. So what does that mean? What you see are a lot of these flags of a sort. I could see us retesting up a bit if we do see some good earnings for some sort, but if Facebook's making a bunch of their earnings off of businesses taking out ads and trying to, and again, it's getting harder to make money as a small business because people are spending money in the places that they need to. Walmart, you know, the grocery store, at the gas pump. Those are going to be the key essentials, and then your utilities. What are previous earnings showing? Let's actually pull this up. I'm going to jump forward here to Delta Airlines because they came out this week. And they have, you know, there was a screenshot off of YouTube. The Maverick of Wall Street is a great channel that does some awesome jobs of showing us the things going on. Okay, but see up. Okay, and then here we go. That's not what I want. Okay, so this is just the earnings of Delta Airlines that came out earlier this week. You'll see here, it was a surprise. Their earnings were lower. The revenue was lower, a little tiny bit lower as well. Okay, not terrible. Okay, however, what is it that they're showing? Okay, is the fact that since their last earnings, what are things we got to keep in mind here? Okay, operating revenue, the passenger and cargo, there's fewer passengers. People are not going and flying as much right now because it's getting expensive, right? They also don't necessarily have as many pilots because that whole shortage as well, that's also causing prices to go up for it. And on this sense, they have a cargo increase. So their total operating revenue has gone up. We want to keep that in mind. They're paying more for salaries, and aircraft and fuel related stuff has gone up 41%. That's a lot. They're paying a lot more to maintain overhead costs, okay? And that's a big chunk, all right? Maintenance, etc., rent, aircraft, etc. Okay, so their operating income, they're actually losing a percentage now. Keep that in mind, all right? And their net income, they're losing. So now they're adjusting their prices, but what this is showing is that demand has taken a very drastic decrease. People are not coming to go fly as much anymore. Okay. Now, what did this tell people, and what happened after that earnings? This, I feel like these candles are a little bit misleading, but right after the earnings, it dumped, right? It was at the top of this part of the channel. It was at the top over here, and then it dumped. Okay. And then it kind of rallied back. But I just want to point out, if you were to take that, okay, from that top to the bottom, we're just at the 0.618, really. Okay, that's a natural little relief rally of sorts, or in this situation, a few profits taken from that quick movement, right? That's normal. So very likely, you know, continuing, if people are hurting and not able to continue with the, you know, the business side of things, and prices of maintaining things go up, they have to make their adjustments. They may have to fire people. They may have to make those adjustments as well. And so again, what does that do? If they fire people and everybody's firing people because the economies, you know, the companies have to now adjust. Now the entire economy has less purchasing power, which actually decreases demand even further. Does that make sense? So we're in this situation where it's actually very rough for a lot of companies, where they might have some pricing power of sorts, but at the end of the day, the balance between their overhead costs and what they actually will be able to bring in as revenue, that's going to be a question mark. Okay, now let's add on in here. Let's go into, I have these ready: NVIDIA, Google, Amazon, Apple, Tesla, Microsoft. If there's one that you want me to go over faster, let me know and I'll pull that up sooner. But notice this, a lot of these are doing this shape, right? Where you're testing a lower part of a channel. So you have, right, you're just at the bottom of a channel and you're generally showing some fair rejection at that point. Now there is some buying, but notice that we're getting to low volume again. And this is on like the daily as well. We're starting to, exhaust the buyers. So do we see this type of resistance already here and we just continue lower? Or, right, the little boost that they got had a lot to do with breaking through that little part of it, right? Chips got a little bit of a rally because I think TSM was the one that reported some good earnings in terms of demand. I still got to go through TSM and look at that a little bit deeper. But again, NVIDIA is not necessarily in the clear just yet, but it's nice to see it break this part of the downward trend. So, you know, we could see, I want to say here, we're going to retest this line and up here. So if I gave you two resistance lines, you're not in the clear till you get past these two. Right, the body of this previous, because that's the most recent, these two green candles show, right, if you're closing at this area, show that there is price, you know, people buying and selling there, okay? And it does also have all this here and here showing right now it's resistance. It was support before, right? We dipped a tiny bit, showed a little more support, but then we broke down. And right now, this shape as well. You could even call it this type of a triangle as well, okay? So I'm thinking we're getting exhausted. So if at the highest, probably up to here before we come back down, very likely looking at, I don't know if the full gap got filled, so let's pull in a little closer to see. We still have a little bit down below that we could fill, right? So, and then above here, there's still a little tiny bit of that gap that we still haven't filled either. So actually, if that's the last part of the gap, I wouldn't be surprised if this just went and did that, okay? Because this rally here had a lot to do with the news that we had from TSM. So I'll add in that in a second. Let's go down here to Google. Google's was supposed to split today, wasn't it? Or is it next week? 15th or 22nd? Yeah, it was today. Oh, next Monday. Okay, so Monday. What will split do? Split's going to create some demand from the public because the public can now finally afford something like Google, right? Grandma's probably like, oh, hey, Google is going to be affordable. We've got kind of this flag look here. We're headed up a little bit, but we still are very much in a, so we broke this part of the downtrend, right? But we're still very much in a downtrend too. So Google still with the split, I imagine right upon opening, you're going to get a bunch of people that are like, oh yeah, it's cheap now, let's go buy it. So retail will maybe pump this up, okay, probably toward this level. Let me give you clear on our chart. Horizontal, right? So we have this recent, right? That's our first target. If we're headed straight up, we got to make sure that this rejection off of that candle, we take care of those sellers as well, right? And then potentially up toward here, but I really don't necessarily see it getting that much of a rally. I would say that you're probably going to see buyers, and every time it gets pushed up, you're just going to see big money try to milk it as much as they can. So, you know, Monday, Tuesday, maybe give it a couple days, maybe give it a false hope for a moment. So that's kind of what I'm thinking is, yeah, maybe something like that and break right above this a tiny little bit, have people thinking you're headed towards something like this gap, and then just reject after by the end of the week. I could definitely see that being the ploy behind the split, putting some people underwater. And also, right, we got these, yeah. Yep, I think it's doing something like that. Okay, so let's add that on here. Let me draw a quick little volume shelf down here. So this right here. Okay, let's go into Amazon. still kind of in this channel. I was trying to see if like, have we accumulated at all for Amazon? Or are we at a point where it's actually volume supports the fact that big money steps in? Not exactly yet, because if I keep zooming out here and we start to smooth out some of this, it's still all a lot of selling. We still do have this very large, right? We have shelf one, like I was saying, with the alpha trends, that's distribution stage 3. And then stage 4, right? This does look a little bit like stage 4 as well, because what stage 4 shows in most that I want to point out is that you have the top end of the channel and then the bottom end of the channel. And you usually have this like break up above, kind of fake people out before we head further down. Okay. Now this, right? If this top part, this is the top of the channel, right? This was a first fake out, but then we didn't really go too much further, right? And so do we necessarily down here have buying? Here you have a decent push up, right? But then look at all this exhausted buying. It's really, right? It's not increasing in a sense, and you still do have quite a bit of holes in terms of pushing it higher. Okay, it doesn't necessarily want to go higher right now. So we could see it break above these two. Best case scenario, for some reason, maybe they say like Prime Day did so great for them in earnings, they could take one more push back up toward this top here before it heads back down. But as of right now, it's still in this extreme downtrend. And ultimately this, right, this is still just an ugly looking flag. So, right, you still haven't broken back up above this. So overall, Amazon, I still feel is headed back toward that $100 range. I think that's pretty okay, like where you have a lot more interest from people. Up here, still a little bit high in a sense. Let's continue. Apple did some interesting stuff this week. It just rallied. You're starting to see a little bit of short covering. What I do believe is some of these shorts might not be willing to hold on for as long right now, and so you're starting to see a little bit of a push back up. Remember, I keep on referring in a lot of my videos to the 11 days that Apple had green in a row, okay? And that's this big push that you have here. So if we have something similar to that, right? Again, Apple leads a lot of things just because it's kind of America's corporate baby, I'd like to think of it. You could have a little bit more of a push higher. That's a possibility, right? But what I do see here is that we're very likely going to smack into some resistance up here. What used to be support exactly here is currently acting as resistance. So if we go higher, we got 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. There's a couple of areas that I feel Apple very likely will get some solid rejection from, especially if, continued. We've got, earnings issues, right? Every company is going to try to adjust. Apple's not going to be immune to the effects of the economy. Yeah, they do have pricing power, right? People are going to, will people necessarily not go purchase their Apple product that they want? Yeah, there's going to be adjustments. Are there available alternatives nowadays that people can use? Yeah, they might not love it, but they will sign up and use those other phones as well. So, does Apple command that type of loyalty? I do see a little bit of it, but when it comes down to people paying, more, getting more groceries and being able to feed their family versus a better phone, yeah, that's people are gonna get a smaller gig version, or hold off on upgrading their phone. So I do think that we may potentially have and show some slowdown of sorts. So with earnings coming up, I do see a earnings run up possibility. People do have a lot of hope with that. Maybe we'll see volume rise a bit, but depending on what they do report, I would have more of a bearish outlook to it, especially if we do have we smack straight into resistance up here. Okay, let's go on. Tesla. You know, I don't know if you guys noticed, but really, like, there's, oh, let's do what he had posted too. Down here, he's showing on the weekly. The weekly shows a 3-1. In this situation, it's going to be the, well, it could actually be either one. Okay, so let me explain this for you guys. Oh, I went too low. What it's showing is we have that most recent one. Technically, it's a green candle, right? It's a 3. And then we have an inside 1. Okay, so we have it kind of high up here. So that's showing, right? We've got a 3 and then a 1, something on the inside. It doesn't matter if it's green or red, realistically. You got to keep in mind, it's what this just shows right here is that buyers and sellers broke the previous candle above the top and the bottom, right? So we're really, we created a new battleground. Think of it that way, all right? Fighting top and bottom. And then the next game we had, right? We had open here and then close here. So we're staying inside. So what does this say? Well, in terms of the candle and in terms of the target, you either have the entry at the top here, you either enter here and play to the top of the last green candle, right? That's a very small move. Keep that in mind though. Or the moment it breaks down below here, we head toward the bottom here. And so if there is a bearish bias to it, right, you could look for getting in the moment we break down below the previous part of that 1 in there. Okay, so what does that look like? This bottom part is all of this, you know, this flag looking situation, but also a pennant as well, right? So we're squeezing closer and closer and closer before we either have a break upward or a break downward. Now earnings is coming up next week, right? Tesla, with their pricing power, etc., I do imagine that they did fairly well, but the question again comes down to, does the cost of operation suddenly jump up? I don't, you know, I know a lot of our friends and a lot of people that may be in the Bay Area, maybe ask around and see, hey, you know, have you heard of a lot of people getting fired, or people saying, hey, if you want to keep working here, you're going to have to accept a little bit less. If those situations are commonplace and you're hearing of, right, you can go look on some of the hiring websites and LinkedIn, and there's oftentimes a lot of chatter. You know, if you happen to have noticed that, shout that out into the ICA channel for us if you can. This is, you know, especially as if you've gotten this far in this, I really would like you guys to continue to chat with us in the channel to tell us what it is you see. Hey, you know, has gas gone up so much that, you know, it's hurting? And again, a lot of us are feeling these effects, right? A lot of people are trying to cut down and make sure that, you know, certain ends can meet because the price of gasoline and the price of groceries have shot up so much. Okay, so in this situation, that shows a little bit of a bearish bias. So you could even say we could be targeting this area down here. Okay, that's a target for us to go deal with this bottom supply and demand of people. Otherwise, the other break up above was very likely, I want to say, this little move up here. Okay, so that's what Tesla would be saying in terms of the strat, which direction you would break in terms of a weekly, right? The weekly trigger. Now, if we go into a closer situation and talk about more of a daily trigger, let's go here and do this. We're going to open up our strat assistant real quick and just take a look at what it says here. We have a 3-1-2 bullish reversal when it comes down to our daily though. Okay, so our daily shows that we could potentially be headed up. Well, that's pretty, you know, I like to think that's pretty straightforward. We're headed back up to retest this top area, but just be careful because you could be met with rejection at any point over here as well from these previous buyers and sellers. Okay, so at the very least for the upward move, I think we're retesting this. We'll see that and see what happens there. It very likely there's, you know, after that scenario, it could go higher. We could see great earnings and then, you know, Tesla bulls just pump things up, right? We might come back, retest it a little bit, and it can head up after earnings, okay? Pump up, people, take their profits, earnings say great things, but then it still kind of fakes some people out, and then maybe it heads up higher. But then I would want to say that recession and the economy fears very likely can bring us back into this channel. That's people react, say, oh, Tesla's still going up. Now the bearish side of things, I do want to point out, because I don't, maybe we finally do, Elon does a great job of the politics of his company, I would say, right? Doing it, aside from the Twitter thing, but I would even say there could be the ploy of he needed to dump some shares of Tesla higher up to keep some money. And so Twitter was just a distraction. But, if anything, earnings pump up toward this, I could see enough Tesla bulls doing that. And then if we do have a bearish movement, or if we do end up having very poor earnings, which again can be very likely with that, then we're headed back down toward the bottom of these, right? And we're going to retest that. I'm sure there will be some push back up, whether at the bottom here, right? The first point of resistance is going to be at the bottom here. We've bounced already so many times. And then potentially retesting something like this to head down. So overall, I was saying this last time as well, overall still bearish because the numbers of Tesla are still extremely inflated. What I'm pointing out here is that price to earnings ratio is still way too high. Price to earnings ratio is still at a 97, which shows that you need to have earnings 97 times for it to be worth this. Now, if we do better on earnings and the number goes up, then that will adjust, and we'll have to see what people are willing to pay from that point forward. So keep that in mind too, all right? But Tesla, we got that upper resistance. I can see us testing that with a earnings run up. But again, it's Friday, Monday is the 18th. So this is Wednesday. Monday, Tuesday, expect some buying for Tesla, probably to pump it up unless some bad news comes for some reason. And then retest that top. Earnings can push it up higher or lower. Be careful with that reaction, all right? Okay, let's finish off with a couple of these last ones. And then do you have any requests that you want me to go over? Just Microsoft. I think Microsoft said something about layoffs as well. So this, we'll just keep seeing that shelf, retesting the bottom of the shelf. Do we have enough buying in Microsoft to support it? We got a shelf here. We got a shelf here. We had a little bit up there, but notice this too. So test top of it before we have an exit out of the flag. This is usually a bear flag exit, okay? So how I view this, right? This is showing up everywhere. I just want to point that out. See if you can notice it too. You got, right, upper resistance, right? And then so first off with the first, you do have the first guy, breaks down below, okay? Then you have this larger channel, right? Larger channel, what I like to think of is you usually have that top, trap, break down to the bottom of it, test the bottom supply before we break down lower, okay? So if that's going to continue happening, right, we already have, think of this box that we have here, then we could very possibly come and retest this before heading further lower, right? That would kind of be like the trappy scenario. So keep that in mind. And that would just, again, a little rally to say, hey, things are going to get better. Inflation's peaked, things aren't as bad. I would be careful in believing those situations because, it takes time and, people, think of it this way, if people are losing jobs, then that type of demand is really going to relax as well, which really sucks out the money velocity, and which means it's just going to take time to build things back up to where things were. And if everybody's struggling and spending less, then companies that rely on that profit margin, rely on people coming to the market to buy their products, they sell less and therefore things contract. We're in a contraction. We pump things up so much, we have to contract. That's just how things are right now, okay? Let me go into TSM, and you sure you don't have anything you want me to go over before before we end off over here?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, see, TSM reported earnings. They made some more money, gave a little bit more on their earnings and revenue. Let's take a look into if it's posted in here just yet. Price to earnings ratio. So they're at a 16. That's not bad. So this, it's not a bad, it's in certain cases, it could be viewed as inflated. However, in our current era, 16 isn't that bad, right? You could see as low as like 10 or 12, but if the company has demand for the future, you could be willing to pay a multiple of what earnings is, expecting that earnings may continue to rise. And for TSM, they do have pricing power at this point. It might not continue to be that way if people continue to build and find a way to catch up, but overall TSM has control in some senses of the market in a way. All right. I do want to be careful. I still see this though, right? Do you see that? We're right at the top of this part of the channel. If this is a rally of one, a rally of one, and a rally of one, right? Let's go do that real quick. Let me show you guys my Fib channel draws. Oop, and we'll end off with that, right? Because I know there's been a lot of nice Fib channels that I've shown you. We've got the top to the bottom. We've got this downward channel. So we go under here on our Fibs. I go into my Fib channel. And the first thing you do is you look for a floor, right? You look for where you have the bottom of things. From there, I like to take this and go upward, right? Because that way you kind of get the best visual of it. And what I want to do is find what I can consider a measurement of one. What is the measurement of one? In most Fib situations, you're measuring what you want to consider the unit that we're going to base everything off of. Now, a hint that we have down here is the fact that every one of our rallies can be considered a rally of one, or you can even consider every rally to be a rally of 0.5, if anything, or a 0.6, right? So you could play around with these. At the end of the day, the Fib ratios, you could have more or less of them drawn here, but they're generally spaced enough where find the one that you think looks the best in terms of respect to your numbers. Okay, so if I want to say that's a whole 2 up there, we've got a lot of bouncing off of certain resistance lines and this pretty nice looking downward channel, especially from this movement on. Now, what is it that I'm necessarily moving and measuring a measurement of one of, right? Let's see if we can notice that here. What are some measurements of one from 0 to 1 that we have? So the last rally actually went past it. You can think this last rally went up here, relieved itself, and went up higher. Okay. And this from 2 dropped all the way down and tested the 0.5. So 1.5 of a relief. All right, that's interesting. Okay. Here I have that relief of 1, right? This was why I had it drawn here, was we have that relief of 1. So here, do we see this at 1 just yet? We're not quite there. So a little higher? Yeah, I definitely can see us going there, but we're getting close to that resistance that you got to imagine we've been respecting now. If we do break up above it, we can target the next potential Fib ratios of that as well, if you'd like to, okay? Real fast up top, let's see, A1, 2, 2, 3. Okay, so if this was an Elliott Wave as well, let's give an Elliott Wave consideration before I check you guys out. So down, boom, 1, 2, right? Quick reaction. Here, oh, why did it disappear? Let's go one more time. 1, 2. Here's a consideration here. 3 peaked up above 4 or 4. We don't want to go back below that, but we never did. And then 5 or 5. Okay, so actually let's potentially even say that we have 3, 4, 5 because we have that fractal in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the middle as well. Okay, so all this really could be is we could have a pretty decent ABC relief. we are showing some positive movements on here, but it's just the candle for today really showed that it kind of fluctuated, right? You got kind of that spinning top looking type of candle. So now I see a little bit more relief upward for this for now. Could go up toward the 1, bounce off that a little bit, bounce off some of these previous resistances that we have right here. Keep in mind, we're right at it, right? Right here and a little bit higher as well. Bounce off of that, and then we'll see from there. We have to see if these impressions continue to give us, right? Here was your a bigger divergence, you might imagine. Point here and then point here. So that's what's creating our rally right now, our rally here. Okay. Same with here. This gave you a rally too because of that divergence. Are we in the clear with NVIDIA or TSM right here? I don't think so either, because the buying is starting, but the volume of this isn't enough to say that composite man is accumulating to a point that we want to jump in necessarily, right? I would want to see more volume, comparative, and continuing, then yeah. And on the weekly, here's a good thing about it. Weekly, you see how we're curling. So if we start to, next week, if we see some nice green impressions on this and we start to head back up, we could see a little bit more of a rally for TSM here too. So, but again, many of our charts have this distribution looking graph. And with that distribution looking graph, it's hard to estimate exactly where you potentially could start to come back around, right? Oh, why did that? Where does that happen? The first bigger bounce I can expect would be down here, right? So if we do break down below here, you got to be careful though. I want to make sure that you understand if we break down below this for TSM, we're involving all these buyers and sellers in which we moved up so quickly through. You're not going to get true support till you hit these people down here. Okay. So the first downward bounce, solid bounce you could imagine, like I wouldn't even be surprised if it just follows this channel and eventually when it does hit this, rejects back up. So we'll keep an eye out for that. All right. Okay. I'm gonna continue to try to do this weekly. I'll do my best to try to schedule them through the week with you guys a little bit better. I will try to aim for Sundays mostly. It's just this weekend I happen to have prior engagements, so I won't be able to do it this Sunday. But usually I would probably say like Sunday night, like 7 or 8 p.m. If you guys are cool with that, that might be a good idea to get ourselves ready for the week. That's usually when I'm, quietly sitting here in front of my computer, just going over my charts, and we can continue to share and discuss things as we go. I will also do my best to invite the other moderators as well, to get them in here to talk a little bit, to get a little bit of conversation, to get their eyes in here too. So you guys get, not only my voice, but the entire ICA voice that you interact with throughout the week. So, bear with me. I know I'm just getting this started. This wasn't necessarily a part of the original plan with you guys. The original plan was just, get you guys the videos of what you need to do and interact through the Discord. But again, I feel like, you guys understand what I'm trying to talk about in this. I'm going to be going through these charts anyway. Let's just set a time when I'm going to go through it and you guys can participate, discuss, and talk with me. I'm happy to have you guys. You can just watch or discuss. It's up to you, but at least help you guys get set up for the week to have an idea what I see on the charts on my side. Okay. So hope that was useful, you guys. Go ahead and continue to drop additional tickers that you guys want me to look over. But again, I'll have these always uploaded to YouTube so that you guys can take a look over them and discuss them as well after the fact. The weekend should be, ICA graduates, I expect the weekend to have a bunch of conversation about what I had to say here. Put it on the side as you watch YouTube and just, put out questions and talk to me if you'd like to, and we'll continue to add additional information and value to our channel for you guys. Okay. All right. I will chat with you guys later in the week, and I'll schedule those with you guys so we can get that done. But I hope that was useful, and happy charting. We will see each other pretty soon. All right.
All right. Thank you.